For those of you who have joined, I just like to say good morning in case you're joining from South Asia. Um, it's still not late to say good morning to those in South Asia. And for those joining from other parts of the world, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you for joining at whatever time zone you're living in. My name is Ehtesham Abbas. I am the Director for Programs and Operations at Center for Communication Programs, Pakistan, which is one of the sisters organizations of Johns Hopkins University Center for Communication Programs based in Maryland. I will be with you for about an hour today, and I will have the honor to moderate 4 very insightful sessions today. As you will know from the schedule of day 3, in case you have gone through that, this session is called Employing New Technologies. And this is very interesting. Many a times, whenever you are using the word technology, you use the word apply, A-P-P-L-Y, rather than employ. And many of you might have this question as to why we have used the word employing. And this is a very conscious decision because we sincerely believe that the times that we are living in are perhaps one of the most high-tech times known to human race whatsoever. COVID-19 surely was not the first global epidemic, but it surely was the first epidemic in an increasingly connected world. We all know how technology enabled all countries to be knowing exactly what was happening in China and then what was happening in Italy. That was never the case for any epidemic that happened prior to COVID-19. It was because the world was increasingly connected. We actually saw times in which doctors living in United Kingdom were helping people, living in areas that only had access to internet and not doctors in their own area. And I could still remember in the June last year, once I got COVID positive, and thanks to Zoom, my office, kept on going as usual. And from dashboards to helplines, from checkups to internet to rapid testing solutions, technology remained pivotal to almost everything that human race was doing, to build back better during COVID-19 as well as after it. And when technology is this important, you just don't apply it, you employ it, because it is here to stay whatsoever. With this said, since this is our first session, without further ado, I'd like to, this moment, to introduce you to the first presentation of today. It is regarding a mobile application called Learning Tree. That's a mobile-based learning solution that paved the way for continuity of education in a scenario when the schools were shutting down for unknown duration and when intermittent opening was still too risky for children to be attending the schools. It will be presented by Mr. Ahmed Lodhi, who is the Research, Evaluation and Learning Coordinator at Save the Children Pakistan. And this abstract was also co-authored by Ms. Sobia, Kazi, Community Mobilizer, Legal Rights Forum, Pakistan. And given the co-presenter also joins us, Mr. Muhammad Aneem Rahman, who is the business analyst, Save the Children, Bangladesh. Over to you, Ahmed, for the first session of today, and best of luck.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining in for this presentation on Save the Children's remote learning application called Learning Tree. Just to share the background, Learning Tree was conceptualized in an environment where school operations were obstructed by spread of COVID-19, which increased risk exposure of school-going children and through them of their families. This led the government to intermittently shut schools in Pakistan, causing learning losses, which Save the Children tried to capture globally through a comprehensive study on impact of COVID-19 on children. In Pakistan, we found that 78% children reported closure of schools, during which only 7% caregivers thought their children were learning as much at home as they did at school, and 90% thought they were learning little or nothing at all. In this context, Save the Children observed that beneficiaries of our accelerated learning program, around 2,800 girls aged 10 to 11, and their teachers, had started using WhatsApp as an alternative mechanism of learning where teachers shared materials and students engaged with it. This, of course, was a group based engagement, but we decided to pilot a solution which could individually tailor content to suit each child's learning ability. So we decided to establish Learning Tree as a pilot program that will support remote learning through app-based engagement. And we baselined earlier this year, gauging the perception of students, caregivers, and teachers about the solution, and also sought their input to design the prototype. Another part of the baseline was to assess the existing learning ability of all the children through Holder assessment, and this would then be reassessed at the end line to gauge the product's viability. The baseline found that almost 80% children had already familiarized themselves with remote learning thanks to their innovative teachers, and more than 70% parents were also willing to support them by providing smartphones. I will now invite Anim, who is a member of the tech team of Save the Children Bangladesh, so he can describe to you how the application engages teachers and children through their caregivers through different kinds of content and how we utilize the backend analytics to develop results.
Hi everyone. So today I'm just going to quickly go through how Learning Tree works and how a child uses it. So let's say this is a test account, by the way. So, and all the data you see here are test data that have been entered by us. So let's explore how Nagima, a child Nagima, would use Learning Tree. So her parent, this Sakwat guy, he is the caregiver or the parent. And from there, Nagima chooses to log into her profile. So she selects her name. She comes in here and she sees three types of content categories. So she chooses language and literature, and she wants to play one content. So she starts playing it. And these are the engaging contents which are beautifully created by our developers. And Nagima then starts exploring it. I'm pausing here because these contents are quite long. But what usually happens is Nagima will go and explore and engage with this and keep performing the activities this content requires her to, and she'll be answering as such. And after that is done, that's it. She has read a content. Now, what happens? How we as the admins are tracking this and learning how Learning Tree is helping the children. So what we do is, as an admin, we log in, we see the children dashboard, and from here we will be able to see which contents are being played, how many have been completed, and how many have been left incomplete. And also we can see how many correct answers have been given and how many have been incorrect. Similarly, professional development, and they see these 8 categories. So let's say they want to explore this, it's similar to the children, and they start playing a content. So once they start playing it, it's similar, it's again engaging for the teachers. They just go through it and they start answering. As you can see, these are the modules that they have to go through. So yep, this is how it goes. So I'm just going to skip this again because again it's a bit long, and you can see at the bottom they get a dashboard where they see the latest contents that they have viewed and what's their current progress. So once the teachers have done it, it's similar. Again, as an admin, we log in and we see the teacher dashboard and we see which contents they're playing. And here we'll be able to see what contents they're playing, how many are incomplete and how many are complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Anim, for describing the front and back ends of the application in such a short time. I'll just share some usage analytics from children and teachers and try to deliberate on what they imply. If we look at the percentage of engaged content among children, we notice a strong preference towards numeracy occupying 75% of usage. There is a reluctant 25% usage for literacy content and a completely ignored social emotional learning content with 0% usage. From our deliberation with the field team about these statistics, sadly, our intended field team member couldn't participate in this presentation. We noticed that usability of content is determined by primary familiarity with the subject area. So, since students were not familiar with social emotional learning, they haven't engaged with this component at all. The difference between familiar subject areas of numeracy and literacy is primarily resulting from a language barrier among these young girls, since the application has only instructional interface in local language, but the content itself is in English. So fewer girls engaged in literacy content compared to numeracy, which did not depend on their ability to understand in English. Independent of these statistics, it has generally been difficult to onboard girls in a rural context where, despite their willingness, caregivers are unable to support children due to their lower technological understanding. If we look at the usage statistics of teachers now, they have better rounded engagement of content. Of course, this engagement is more schematically guided by Save the Children, so you will see child safeguarding and mental health, MHPSS, which have been our priority being completed by all. But we can also notice that these teachers who are equally unfamiliar with social emotional learning as a subject area still have a higher usage than their students. This is because of their better comprehension of English language. If we look at these usage statistics and triangulate findings of both groups to develop learnings, the first learning is that local language must be preferred for instruction and content within the application. Of course, literacy can have a separate content for English language if that has to be taught, but the instruction and other content should be in the local language itself. Our field team also felt that teachers are more tech savvy, which caused lesser hurdles in onboarding them on the application. So dependence on parents for onboarding of children should be actually replaced with utilizing teachers, since they have a marked difference between their capability of using technology. In terms of learning mediums now, we believe that transition to remote learning has to be more gradual, from traditional classroom to firstly low-tech solutions and then eventually to high-tech products. Also that within this transition, students must first be engaged in subject areas that they are more familiar with, and low-tech content might prove to be more facilitating. Our final learning in this is that an in-app instructional response mechanism is important for helping with the usage of application. Since children and teachers are already using an application, the same application must have mechanism to report difficulties in response to which instructional content can be uploaded to guide them. So these are some early learnings that we've drawn from a still ongoing pilot, by the way, and we will wait a little longer to extract more usage data to develop a roadmap for design improvements. But making this presentation has helped us determine a direction for now, and we hope that it has been of assistance to our participants who might be planning to develop similar remote learning solutions. So we are open to your questions and suggestions now. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Lodhi, and of course, uh, sorry, Mr. Aneem Rahman from Bangladesh. So before we can go to the questions, I think so to date, one of the best gift, that we can give as humans to another human is our words of appreciation. And I can still see an empty chat box with regards to that. So, please We will be expecting, warm words straight from your heart into our inbox to encourage the participants. And please let me know in case there are any questions from your side for Mr. Ahmed, for Mr. Aneem Rahman, and we'll send it his way.
If I could jump in here, I think there is a question that was asked to Aneem in the chat, and if Aneem could just come and repeat that question and the response that he has given, other people might have the same question.
Okay, yeah. So I remember. So the question was, does the app work offline, and what is the kind of data connection required to share user data? Aneem, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, the app does work offline, but for the onboarding process, you have to be online first to log in. Once you have logged in and you have downloaded the contents, and you only have to download the contents once. So after the contents have been downloaded, you can keep playing the contents offline numerous times, like infinite times. You do not have to be online again to play the contents. And regarding how the information is fetched back to our server, it is done like so. For that, again, the users need to be online. Once they're online, our API fetches the information regarding the engagement with the contents back to our server. And how the application has been developed, we have used the cross-platform mobile application development framework called Flutter to develop this. So because we have used the cross-platform framework, this application is currently released on Android, but we can also release it on iOS. Thank you.
I'd also like to add to this that you might have seen that we have shown the user statistics that students have used the application less frequently than the teachers. So one of the concerns here that we face is that these students have to get back on the internet for the data to be synced to our server and for us to find the analytics. So we are assuming that a lot of these children have not connected to the internet again, but are still using the application compared to the teachers who have better access to technology. So their data comes in to us a lot quicker. So when we're going to do the inline, we will go to each of these students again and then have them connect to the internet and be able to sync their data. So the results for now are very temporary, and we can't say how well updated they are in the case of students, but for teachers, they are pretty up to the mark.
Great. Any other questions? I can see there are multiple comments coming your way, and of course, given we have time at the end, we can take any other questions for any of the session that were presented whatsoever. However, in the interest of time, we'll just give the participants one more minute to shoot any questions that they might have, and then we'll move to the next session. And so the second presentation today in the Employing Technology session is from India. It is a research on how immersive and interactive way of communication ensure community participation. Its focus is to actually study the impact of augmented and immersive technologies on users with respect to knowledge, attitudes, and practices. And it will be co-presented by two esteemed professors from Anwar Jamal Kidwai Mass Communication Research Center at the Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Dr. Krishna Shankar Kusuma and Ms. Pragati Paul, both of them are professors in the Jamia Millia Islamia. Over to you both.
Yeah, I think we have our presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. The title of the research paper is Mediating Transformation and Social Change with the Vulnerability Communities Through Immersive Way. Storytelling through AR, VR and interactive documentaries. I'm Pragati Paul, an Assistant Professor, Development Communication at AJK MCRC, Jamia Millia Islamia, and the co-author of the paper is Dr. K.S. Kusuma, Associate Professor, New Media Storytelling. When health emergencies and pandemic occur, the most affected people are always children, women, and older people in any community. The COVID-19 pandemic is harming the health, social, and material well-being of the individuals. The stress emphasis on the most vulnerable risk-bearing communities at the refugee camps, war zones, urban migrants, and poor who cannot afford a meal, work, and better health is a dream for them. The aim of the research is to bring the stories of both positive and negative situations to the non-risky communities to participate in building the cooperation and rebuilding communities. It is important to bring participation through an immersive and interactive way using horizontal forms of communication. One needs to experience the actual environment in its natural habitat and interact with the risk leading to social behavior change communication. In this context, the use of gamified mobile augmented reality, virtual reality, and interactive documentaries will help in mapping and communicating the dialogue with real life. The objectives of the research is to study the impact of augmented reality on the users in context to knowledge, attitudes, and practices, focusing on theoretical and practical implications. The research also seeks to investigate the concept of empathy within interactive documentaries and explore how emerging technologies potentially enable a significant shift in the user's experience of a subject, leading to social change. Pre- and post-media experiences will be studied through the methods of observation and focus group discussions. The notions of empathy-driven practice is also studied with the help of key informant interviews with the creators. Augmented reality is understood as a process of adding visual display by overlaying useful digitally created content like text, tools, images on the physical environment with the help of software. It can also be termed as a medium in which the digital information is added onto the real physical world in registration with the world. In virtual reality, the artificial world is created in the mind of the users and is experienced by wearing a specifically designed headset. VR environments immerses the users in a totally environment which is away from the real world. Humans can easily see and recognize the 3D information. They can easily see any object from different perspectives and understand its dimensions. The real world consists of physical entities, buildings, infrastructures, natural landscapes, and mountains. AR system provides a place for representation of ideas which can be made interactive and don't require much physical space. Till the 20th century, to visualize some construction or a building, the only way was to make a model or sample construction of that thing. If it was desired to make a piece of information available in a specific physical space, the only real way to do it was to create a physical artifact that either was or contained a representation of that piece of information. A community of practice is a joint activity with the common commitment of the individuals in questions and with a common collection of mutual assets. It is a group of people who share a concern or problem or a passion about a topic and who deepen their knowledge and expertise in the area by interacting on an ongoing basis. The project also emphasizes the idea of development communication in the field of theory and practice. Development communication is the application of communication to promote social development. Deriving from the concept of the stages of change theory, the project relies on the individual change in participatory communication and clarifies the psychological cycle that individual goes through in nature. Participatory communication plays an important role in the study. The study highlights the role of participation communication in mediating social change in community-based media projects. As indicated by Mephalopoulos, participatory communication is a practice and a concept that holds great potential in the communication for social change. Living in a heavily networked and cluttered media reality, our stories need to be really unique and unexpected to gain attention. Stories are about the audience. Know your audience and adapt to them. Treat them as the hero whenever you share a story with them. Risk communication, as defined by WHO, is the exchange of real-time information, advice, and opinions between experts and people facing threats to their health, economic, or social well-being. There are two broad risk models that are commonly used in risk communication. The first is the realistic approach, whereby the risk is seen to be objective and independent of social context, and the second is the social constructionist approach, where risk is seen to be interrelated with socio-cultural context. One potential way to ensure appropriate risk communication during COVID-19 is through the use of AR/VR, because the public largely relies on media and social relationships to inform their level of risk perception and create empathy amongst users actively involved in the performance of conscientization. Practice-based research encourages thinking through art to interact with experiments. It is an original investigation undertaken in order to gain new knowledge partly by means of practice and the outcomes of that practice. The study provides conditions for future immersive interactive practices through using human-centered design practices and involves the creation of a space in which the users of immersive experiences can gain an increased awareness of issues, which is COVID-19, and solutions which can lead to individual transformation. The practice element of the project will be discussed by Dr. K.S. Kusuma. Thank you.
Namaskar, I am Dr. K.S. Kusuma. Along with me, my colleague Pragati Paul. This is our multimedia practice piece. We have
Okay, so in the interest of time, I think so the audience might have gone adequate understanding about what the solution was. Before we move to the questions, since these are winters and we are likely to have very cold palms, one of the very climate friendly ways to warm them up like this, you don't need any fossil fuels, and the second one is to give somebody a applaud, and after this wonderful presentation, I would like to see your appreciation, applauds rolling into our chat box, along with any questions that you might have for Dr. Krishna and also Ms. Preeti. So over to you for any questions that you might have. So I can see some very encouraging comments coming your way. But let's wait for any questions that we have for Dr. Krishna.
Yeah, I think if there's a multimedia practice part, we have actually what we are doing is explain. Maybe later the audience can see maybe that video is uploaded. So hope to see. I mean, more of this. We are also developing the interactive games with the class 6 children in schools in Delhi on Corona related messages. They play games and they get awareness and more immersive. That way we are trying to both on mobile, tab, and we have a game also. If you would like to see, you can see there.
Yes, and I think so it would be wonderful in case we can, see any, links that are also shared with the participants so that they can, look at the prototypes that have been developed with respect to this in their own time. And I would ask the tech team and Asim, in case you can please also share it with people. Yeah, there we have. Another, but I have a
the-
question
yeah.
to both of you,
So
Dr.
the link is shared, which the game which is in development, and AR we have developed, and VR also we have developed actually. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Krishna, I have a question, which is that normally the mass communication departments, do not really go into tech solutions because that's something that is mostly coming from students who are studying software and other things. And it is so heartening to see departments from social sciences to be developing prototypes, because that's where the real need is, because tech needs to for most of the tech solutions that have to address social barriers. There has to be input of people who understand social sciences, and that's where the Department of Mass Communication is very important. So my question is, how have you garnered a tech solution as a mass communication department?
Yeah, actually, in fact, AJK Mass Communication Research Center in India or in Asia is one of the pioneering in its, whether it's establishing studios or we have a combination of both production and theory. We have animation, we have development, MA in development communication, which was initially funded by Ford, and we have convergent journalism, we have MA Mass Com. So in my guidance itself, there is one VR project is also developed at Oculus Quest. So we are trying to establish more immersive way of teaching and media content creation. And Dr. Pragati is also, she is expert on developing non-digital games for mental health. So we thought that, okay, let's combine the AR, VR and the game technology. So we went into we consulted some of the students at the class 6th. So we made them to develop certain games on the Scratch, which is again, Scratch is a platform for the free game development with the easy coding system, which is taught in many of the Delhi colleges, Delhi schools. So we give our idea actually. So we collaborated with the children. They developed almost 5 games. And we are asking many people to also sharing, and they are playing. And the AR also, we are trying to make it more AR gaming. So at least we can maintain the distance, and at least with the QR codes and exploring the physical space in the buildings to through the games, and they will get to know the variety of messages that can be created. So it is also networked among them. So we were trying actually, one of the motivation is UNESCO's Cloud Source Sidra, the VR piece, which they have created, and which have shown to many of the people in the World Economic Forum, and they kind of work like an empathy machine. I want to say that situation the viewer in the actual situation of the migrants. So we were thinking that during the COVID also, we need to bring people to, more aware and also more empathetic towards the situation, be it a fundraising or be it a COVID protocol exercising their awareness. That's what we thought, that we should push and use these technologies. I mean, like for example, QR code has become more very easy in many places, but mobile AR is going to emerge in a bigger way. So here we teach that actually as a part of new media, as a part of, I also teach mobile storytelling. So that way,
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Krishna. And, it was for the comprehensive answer. Without further ado, in the interest of time, now we'd like to move to our third presentation that talks about, one of the biggest addiction of modern day. Any guesses? Yes, social media. And, Rat Push, as they call it, reached out to every mother in the predominantly tribal region of South Rajasthan during COVID-19. It adopted telecounseling and digital media and engaged men because evidence suggested that they are drivers of dietary choices in the household. It also uses a very popular character from a very famous local movie. I know the name, but I will rather want it to be revealed by the presenters. This abstract was submitted by Ms. Namita Wadhwa, who is working as the Associate Director as part of the Social and Economic Empowerment Practice in IPE Global, and Syed Saad Ahmed, who is a Documentation Officer. I will now request Ms. Namita Wadhwa, who is a technology specialist, to present her insightful presentation for others to learn from and benefit from. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Namita Wadhwa from IP Global Limited, a development sector consulting organization headquartered in New Delhi. I speak today on behalf of the team of the Rajpush project at IP Global. The objective of our presentation today is to share our learnings from the work we undertook during the pandemic to ensure that care for the most vulnerable continues uninterrupted. And in that journey, we explored the use of social media and voice-based communication for last-mile connectivity. Going to the next slide. Let me start by introducing you to the Rajpush project. Rajpush is funded by the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. It follows a transformative pathway to improve maternal and child nutrition and health. It champions two key components: cash transfers to ensure additional resources at the household level for new mothers to help them eat a nutritious diet, and a 360-degree social and behavior change communication strategy to help create an enabling environment for the adoption of recommended pregnancy care, child care, and nutrition practices. At the core of the project is the approach of using existing government service delivery platforms and building capacities of the frontline workers, incentivizing them to focus on nutrition outcomes, building data-driven monitoring capabilities, integrating technology at every step, and most importantly, continuous engagement with government functionaries to create accountability and ensure sustainability. The project is continuously sharing lessons and evidence to inform policy. Going to the next slide. Let me elaborate briefly on the SBCC component under the project. Rajpush undertook formative research that helped us identify motivators and barriers to influence behaviors around appropriate maternal and child nutrition practices. Such studies helped the project define categorically three elements of the strategy: what messages are required and who should be the target audience for the same, what is the communication hook or the pivot for the messaging. Like in our case, it was the child that was the aspiration. What are the various channels of communication that are effective in the region that we are working? Rajpush SBCC strategy was a well thought out plan that ensured that the messages reach the intended target from several sources to maximize the touch points for a greater recall. Going to the next slide. Rajpush had a firmed up strategy and related interventions were designed around it, with the government also invested in several of these. However, the pandemic posed some serious concerns to the plan. The lockdown imposed during both the waves of the pandemic ensured that interventions like interpersonal counseling were stopped entirely. Even when the restrictions were eased, the general fear among people and safety considerations prevented them from availing services from the frontline workers. Rajpush had invested in interpersonal counseling of family members at household level, as well as group counseling of men folk, especially at the work sites. The lockdown restricted such interventions. The other challenge came in the form of disruption of government services. Last mile delivery centers that were providing antenatal checkups and counseling services ceased to function, and the functionaries were handed over additional charge of COVID relief work. Finally, government spending on mass media was diverted to COVID specific messaging. All of this required immediate actions on the project to ensure alternate channels so that messaging continuity to the target beneficiaries remain. This brings us to two initiatives that were piloted by the project. Going to the next slide, The lockdown in March 2020 brought everything to a standstill, and like everything else, the entire wheel of interpersonal and group counseling under the Rajpush project also stopped. Most notably, with the disruption of all immediate last mile care services, several newly pregnant women in rural India were left with no close guidance. Rajpush had deployed a cadre of nutrition champions whose primary role was to visit these women at their houses and guide them on the appropriate health and nutrition care during pregnancy. We immediately converted this cadre into telecounselors. In 1 month, in Udaipur itself, we reached out to nearly 11,000 women over phones, connecting with them, understanding their challenges, and bridging the gap between them and the service providers. This was again repeated in April 2021 when the second wave of pandemic hit us even harder. However, this time we were even more prepared. We had protocols in place, and again in a month we could establish a connection with nearly 70,000 women in 5 districts. Going to the next slide. It was not without challenges. Most of the time, the phones were not in women's ownership. Hence, it took some relationship building with the family member to talk to the women directly and counsel the immediate family member as well. While the number of women reached daily increased, the counseling was not as intense as when done in person. However, it served the most crucial purpose of staying connected and ensuring that care was delivered through the local frontline workers when immediately required. Rajpush champions became that bridge. Going to the next slide. The next initiative was the use of social media. The project's formative research highlighted that for bringing change around nutrition practices at the household level, it is important to target the men who are the gatekeeper of all the food that comes into the house. Thus, they wield significant decision-making power and hold the potential to become a driver of dietary choices for a household. With COVID restriction in place, we did some preliminary studies to understand how best to reach men. It was understood that they operate smartphones and consume content on social media. We also analyzed what form and format of content works best. Bollywood linkages, humor-based short videos would work is what the studies told us. Bahubali, a South Indian movie macho character, was found quite popular in the region. He was made central to the campaign designed under the project to target men by linking the aspiration of being solid and macho to taking care of one's family during the pandemic and being responsible for their nutritional needs. Going to the next slide. The campaign ran in 3 phases between March and October 2021. The first phase was mostly to establish the platform and the character, and some ground activities supplemented it to boost the engagement. The second phase was dedicated to creating an action-oriented awareness around COVID. The last of the 3 phases was a 4 webisode series wherein each episode depicted the protagonist communicating a crucial message in a real-life setting. Promotion in the campaigns were targeted to the 5 project districts to maximize the reach. To boost engagement, quizzes and user-generated content was also used. In addition to the popular channels like Facebook and YouTube, the campaign also diversified through the channels that were more popular in the local context, like MX Takatak and Moj. Going to the next slide, some key insights that we derived from this campaign were like social media can act as a cost-effective medium for risk communication and community engagement, especially in times like the pandemic. However, with limited smartphone penetration, digital campaign must be complemented with offline interventions. The real-time analytics from the platform help us to continuously monitor and tweak the campaign reach and improve the strategy on the go. It allows specific audience targeting vis-a-vis age, gender, location, etc. Through the larger program monitoring, Rajpush now is trying to evaluate the reach and recall of the messages delivered through the digital media platform. This will help inform the SBCC strategy in the years to come. Going to the last slide, what we recommend to the community working in this domain is that it is worth the effort to embrace digital alternatives. They pay a good dividend in times like a pandemic or when it is difficult to engage with traditional methods. Videos foster a very significant traction and arouse viewer interest. Hence, use of locally generated videos and their dissemination through local community gatherings can benefit immensely, especially in dark areas. Whatever channels are utilized, it is important to identify decision makers and build strategy around them. Rajpusht identified men as an equal stakeholder in its campaign for improved maternal nutrition. Hence, we are innovating with newer ways to reach them every day till the objective of every woman eating enough and eating right is achieved. Thank you.
Very interesting. And you can see how technology is helping projects around the world uh, in mother and child health, in education, in public health, and this one for nutrition. And I will now, this session is also now open to question. I will ask Ms. Namita Wadhwa to perhaps answer the questions that have already been, raised in the chat box. For example, they are regarding, how you ensured that by reaching out to the couples, the main engagement has increased, and how you actually helped, translating the data from telecounseling and then capturing it on a Google sheet like this. Over to you, Ms. Namita, for answering these two questions.
Thank you, Mr. Abbas. So yeah, I'll address the queries that are there on the chat box first. When we say that has this helped us to reach the men, fathers in family health and nutrition, it's a gradual process. As we said that the entire SBCC communication strategy for Rajpusht has a component that is targeting men. So this was an initiative we took in the space where we could not reach them in person. But yes, gradually we are engaging with them. Social media is one component, but we are also doing a lot of on-ground group meetings, specifically at work sites. When we started on this journey, we thought it would be very easy to get the men and to get in touch with the men, try to make it reason out with them that there is a need to invest in maternal nutrition. But you have to understand that more often than not, specifically when the frontline workers are in the field working, the men are also working. So that contact is absolutely not happening. So that's where we realized that while we place people who can catch them after their work hours are over, or we start meeting them at the time when they are at their work sites. So that's one activity we started doing. And then these are the social media platforms that we started reaching. So yes, it is helping. We did a lot of case studies after that. In fact, for our own content, we started speaking to some of these men, understanding whether they see a point in what we are communicating to them. The realization has reached home, but we are still far away from them becoming the decision makers as we want them to be. Second, you are asking that how were Anganwadi workers trained? So for the telecounseling work that we did, because we had no time and we had to immediately convert and bridge the gap that was there, we used our own people that we had deployed because it was more easier to train them. However, what we did was that they were trained on a certain protocol. Those protocols were created. But what we did was that once they had established a communication channel with the beneficiaries on the ground, we started connecting them with the Anganwadi workers. So because Anganwadi workers were also engaged in other activities, they were delivering rations at the household. It wasn't really possible to get them to do these counseling on the phones. But our champions became that bridge and started communicating with the Anganwadi workers and providing information to them. So their direct counseling was not, training was not done on the counseling, but they become the providers wherever immediate ground support was required. Lastly, when you ask which social media platforms and channels were used and how did we have a sense of how many beneficiaries were there, so as I said, there was a pre-analysis that was done on the ground to understand what platforms are being used. So we had done a ground recce to understand platforms, formats and everything. And most of these platforms like Google or Facebook, they give you a sense of how many users are there. Like Facebook would tell you how many users are already there created
in a particular gender, in a particular age group. So you get a sense of, how many can you target in that population area. Even after running the campaigns, we have a very reasonable sense of how many men we have reached in a certain age group in the communities that we were focusing. Thank you.
Thank you, Namita, and thank you for a very comprehensive response to the questions. There are many other questions for you as well, which also means that it was a very popular presentation. People want to know more about it. Congratulations for giving it. And I would request you to perhaps respond to them in the chat box while we move to our last session for today. And for those of you who might be born before 1980, or even before 1990s, we would remember that there used to be a section in major newspapers called Believe It or Not. It used to, contain facts that are very hard to be believed. And so for a modern day millennial or Generation Z who are addicted to social media, are very active on the internet, what if I tell you that I do not have a Facebook account, and I have friends who do not have Facebook account, and that's a believe it or not fact. And while it's a lie for me, I just wanted it to be, wanted to, build some case for the next presentation, because there are so many solutions for those people who are active on the internet, who can be accessed through multiple social media platforms, but rather very few when it comes to, people who are living in media dark areas, who do not use internet, who do not have social media accounts. And that's where we move to our next presentation, and it is by Mr. Shayuni Chatterjee, who is the Director of Gender and Child Rights at Gram Vaani. This abstract is from an organization called Gram Vaani, which actually means voice for village. And without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to her, and then we can take the questions afterwards. Over to you, Ms. Chatterjee.
Thank you, and thanks for the perfect context setting as well. Right, so hi everyone, glad to be presenting here and learning from you all, actually, a lot of them. Thanks for the opportunity. I am Shayuni from Gram Vaani. Gram Vaani primarily functions in India and Ethiopia, and it's mobile-based voice platforms, Mobile Vaani. Asim, can we have the slides on, please? I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So Gram Vaani's mobile-based voice platforms, Mobile Vaani, are a federated network of community media platforms meant primarily for rural communities from media dark region. And the primary aim is to actually reverse the flow of information from top down to bottom up. Next slide, please. In India, we are directly working in states like UP, Jharkhand, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi NCR, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, and in several other states with our partners to disseminate this participatory media platform. So we do have our foot soldiers or field teams present in most of these locations, either directly or through our partners. Next slide, please. So the way these mobile-based platforms, some of the primary features are that they are free to the end users. They can be accessed from any basic mobile phone. Of course, there is an app that can be accessed through smartphone, but the primary one is the IVRS, Interactive Voice Response platform, that can be accessed from basic mobile phones. They are available 24/7 in regional languages and are interactive in nature. Some of the primary functions include hosting of content, which are either uploaded studio-generated content developed by us or content recorded by the community that we call user-generated content, conducting surveys with our users, call patching with experts and the beneficiaries, between experts and the beneficiaries, and moderation. So I'll just briefly explain how this platform functions. So there is this 10-digit mobile number where a person can give in a call. The call gets disconnected, the person gets a call back from the server just to ensure there is no concerns about balance being deducted. Upon getting connected with the IVRS voice-based platform, they can listen to the content that is uploaded by us or has been recorded by other users prior to dialing in. And all the content on these platforms are moderated, as in a moderator, our group of moderator goes through all the content that has been recorded from the community to ensure the quality is good, it is not incomplete or noisy, in case of which they give a guidance call to the user to record the content again. And then it become a playlist of pre-recorded content plus content recorded by the community members. And all of these are actually in the backend, there are analytics and stats to understand what kind of content are generating more traction, what is of more interest to users, and stuff like that, guiding us to actually develop the platform further. Can we go to the next slide, please? For the COVID pandemic, so the traction actually started organically when our users started using the mobile Vaani platforms as soon as the pandemic hit us. Then we, of course, organized our efforts long-term and short-term around it by developing awareness messaging, by encouraging people to share their experience, by conducting surveys with our beneficiaries, by providing emergency support on raised requests through our platform, by helping them with vaccine registration, because remember, initially there was no vaccine registration processes that was available on non-smartphones, and by call patching with the experts for teleconsultancy. Next slide, please. I'll go into a bit of detail of some of these. Right. So in both the waves, we are also facing another, but in both the first waves, we recorded content on emerging government advisories and guidelines with specific sections on myths and misconceptions, and also fact checks of social media forwards. That was very important during the first wave. Experiences shared by our users range from their concerns like unable to receive social entitlements, plights of returning migrants, conditions of quarantine centers, increase in cases of domestic violence and burden of household work with returning migrants, concerns on vaccines, hesitancy, experiences of health workers, etc. To give example of some of the surveys that we conducted, like some of them are mentioned on the slide. So we conducted the school reopening survey in August 2021, where we basically tried understanding what our parents' state of mind, whether they want to send their children to the school or not, what are their concerns, what would they like the children, the schools to arrange for their children. In June, we did two set of vaccine surveys, one with those who have received vaccination, one with those who are still hesitant to receive vaccination, to develop focused, campaign around it. Next slide, please. The survey responses, of course, helped us, to develop micro campaigns, especially on entitlements and social protection schemes like MNREGA, PDS, food-related scheme, and cash entitlements that were being done through the direct DBTs, right? Direct bank transfers. We also facilitated vaccine registration through mobile Vaani platforms, like mentioned before. We collected grievances to resolve ourselves and through our partners. And all these, of course, led to a repository of learnings and insights, helping us to contribute towards our advocacy networks and towards action-based research that we did with our users. Next slide, please. This is just a glimpse of the kind of live statistics and analytics that we receive from our platform, keeping, of course, the identity of our users absolutely, safeguarding that and keeping that safe with us. Next slide, please. So these are some of the numbers. They are a bit old, not up to date, but they will give you an idea of like how many calls, like we received 10 lakhs plus calls on COVID specific platforms that were shared by our own users and users of our partners who use the platforms to, reach to their target groups as well. Then we received 1,000 plus impact stories recorded by the users, and received multiple requests on emergency supports especially in the second wave. We also facilitated cash transfer and distribution of dry ration by collecting feedback and collecting experiences from the community. Next slide, please. So this is the roadmap basically that I guess the entire process helped us with coming up with a complaint repository system that were further enriched by involving target groups and beneficiaries from our partners region. And the survey-based findings on several surveys contributed a lot towards understanding the ground reality and the situation, contributing ultimately towards collective advocacy. There's a video that I'd like to share. May I share my screen now, Asim? It is not being played here. So what I'll do is that I'll share my screen and I'll start playing a part of the video. I guess I'm on time. I have 1 minute left with me.
Yes, you can have a minute.
Right. Thanks.
Let us hear what our women users recorded as challenges faced during the pandemic.
अभी का जो लॉकडाउन चल रहा है, लॉकडाउन में बहुत महिलाओं के साथ में बहुत सारा दिक्कत हो रहा है, क्योंकि पहले तो महिला घर में मतलब अकेले रहती थी, पुरुष लोग अपने काम से बाहर चले जाते थे, मतलब उतना रोका टोका या तो देखा देखी नहीं होता था। लेकिन अभी का सिचुएशन में क्या हो रहा है कि दिन भर पुरुष घर में रह रहे हैं और महिलाओं के साथ में बहुत मतलब कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा बहुत शोषण का जैसा हो रहा है।
मैं एक महिला घरेलू महिला हूँ, तो मुझे बहुत ही परेशानी होता है काम करने में, घरेलू हिंसा से मैं जूझ रही हूँ। मुझे लॉकडाउन के पहले मेरा घर में मेरे पति नहीं रहते थे, बाहर में रहते थे, बट अभी मेरे पति आने के बाद में अच्छे खाना चाहिए, कपड़ा धोना और समय पे नाश्ता खाना पीना सब बनाना पड़ता है। और अगर थोड़ा लेट होता है, थोड़ा सा कुछ प्रॉब्लम होता है, तो उसमें डांट फटकार और गाली गलौज किया जाता है।
ऐसे कोरोना की बीमारी से महिलाओं की मानसिक तनाव अधिक से अधिक बढ़ रहा है, क्योंकि उनको बहुत घबराहट होती है कि अगर ऐसे ही लॉकडाउन चलता रहा और ये कोरोना की बीमारी चलती रही तो महिलाओं की स्थिति और ही गिरती जाएगी। मेरा नाम बबीता शर्मा है। सैनिटरी नैपकिन अभी नहीं मिल रहा है, इसके कारण हम महिला को और लड़की किशोरी को बहुत परेशानी हो रहा है।
Yeah, I hope that was audible.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. So thanks. That's from my end. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shayone Chatterjee. And we need many more tech solutions, because technology, we believe, one very important lesson that we learned today, I'm sure, is that technology should not be a privilege. It should also include people who cannot afford the technology whatsoever. And this is exactly where technology needs to come with solutions that needs to reach out to the hard to reach, to the vulnerable communities, to people who cannot be reached through traditional means of communication whatsoever. And in fact, this brings me down to the end of today's session. And in case there are any questions for Ms. Chatterjee, we'll still would want to have about 2 minutes. We have surpassed our time allocated time by 10 minutes, but we can take one or two questions in case there are any. In the meantime, uh, just a just a thought for all of you before we leave this session, which is that um, technology is not always a new gadget in your hand. It actually is about doing old ways in new ways, doing old things in new ways, actually. So we are still interacting, but in a new way called Zoom whatsoever. And human interaction has always been there. And there are multiple examples for that. So we keep on inventing, new technologies for doing, things that we have been doing otherwise traditionally. I can see a raised hand. Maybe let's perhaps take one question before we can, end this session of ours. Okay, was it a raised hand? I could see that. No, but perhaps it was a mistake. But nevertheless, so the take home question is, take home thought is that technology is something that enables us to advance as a society. And this is a perspective that we should keep in mind. Technology for the sake of technology doesn't make sense. But the real question is, what are those human problems that technology can solve, impending problems that we face today that technology can solve? And this is where employing technology becomes pertinent every following day. There's a there's a link and in the chat box to for you to be able to join the plenary discussion at 1 p.m. and all other sessions that are going to follow. And this is all from my side. And thank you everyone for joining. I can see one hand raised, but Dr. K.S. Kusuma, in case you can perhaps type your last comment in the chat box, because I'll have to call it a day. We have already exceeded our time. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And best of luck and goodbye from our side.